Anohana is an anime that I've heard about for years. I don't think I ever watched it until around mid-2016, and I went into it with decent hopes because everyone talked about how much the series made them cry. And being the kind of person that enjoys feeling like absolute garbage after watching sad anime, I was all for it. The series had a good start to it, and I found myself pretty entertained. But around the midway point, my brain started noticing the characters' true personalities, and I started to really dislike the cast of the show outside of Menma, Jinta, and to a degree, Popo. Why did I start disliking them? Well, they're all worthless human beings, and it all extends from how they grew after the death of Menma. Jinta, out of the entire group, is the one that is most affected by the death of Menma, causing him to be a shut-in because of how guilty he feels for the entire thing. He tries to disguise himself when he goes outside because he can't deal with being noticed by people because of how his thoughts bog him down. When the ghost of Menma first appears, he believes he's just delusional. He refuses to believe that she's real because he's still convinced that it's all just a vision of his own guilt manifesting to torment him. Deep down, Jinta has always wanted to be with his friends again, but because of how much everyone changed after Menma's death, he couldn't really go through with it. He's accepting of the guilt that he exhibits and basically thinks, I dug this grave, so now I'm gonna sit in it. He doesn't believe that he has any right to be friends with these people anymore because he thinks that he's the one that took away their precious friend. He still cares about them, but he also doesn't like how everyone that he kept in contact with has changed for the worst. While Jinta accepts his guilt, he never really tried to fight against it either, deciding to just live with it instead of facing it head on. He's trapped in his old memories, and because of this, he's incredibly similar to Yukiatsu, but the difference between the two is like night and day. Jinta has a habit of putting everyone before himself, but when he actually does think of himself, he's incredibly selfish as well. So selfish to the extent that he even had thoughts about not helping Menma's spirit pass on because he didn't want to say goodbye again. Popo's guilt over Menma affects him a lot differently than the other kids. Like Jinta, he stopped going to school, but he took it a step further and just dropped out altogether. How he copes with the loss of her causes him to constantly go on out-of-country trips, but he always finds himself drawn back to their old hideout, where he seems to be currently living. While he's not on bad terms with any of the others, he didn't really stay in touch with them either. Popo is constantly trying to run away from the guilt that he expresses, and as the series progresses, he seems to get increasingly frantic, fretting over this intense need to appease his dead friend because of him seeing her dead body all those years ago. Yukiatsu, while being someone who admired Jinta as a young child, grew up to have him in quite the opposite viewpoint. He's constantly looking down upon Jinta and doesn't quite seem to be affected at all by Menma's death until people mention her by name, and then he starts getting all angry. He's quite negatively affected by the loss of their friend, because unlike the others, he's dangerously repressed his feelings towards Menma, and it turned him into this very interesting mess of a character. Yukiatsu still loves Menma. He blames everyone else by projecting how he feels about himself because of her. He thinks that he's the reason that she's dead. This is shown several times throughout the anime with his interactions with Jinta, showing his own lingering guilt. He's ashamed of how he is when he sees how badly the situation has wrecked Jinta's life, and the constant talking down to him is nothing more than him berating himself for not coming out any better. While his mental woes do make him a more sympathetic character behind his past trapped self, they do not excuse him for how terribly he's treated his other friends since Menma's death. Sudoku, while being the least affected by Menma's death, is where you start noticing that half the main cast are terrible people. She's quite calm and collected throughout the anime and tries to act out as some sort of arbiter, but often comes across as her being cold or angry. The thing that makes her awful, however, isn't just those characteristics. She knows about Yukiatsu's obsession, and while she didn't know exactly how bad it was, she wouldn't even attempt to try to give him the mental solace that he needed. While she tries to help out midways into the anime, her just idly sitting by and waiting for someone else to come along to solve the problem is why I ultimately feel this way. Out of all the characters, I dislike Anaru the most. She often mimics those around her and puts up this terrible facade, all the while lying to herself. She thinks about Menma a lot when around Jinta because she still seems to be jealous over all the attention that Menma receives from him. Anaru also never seems to take responsibility for anything, as shown by her attitude with avoiding any sort of thing that she finds tough to deal with. She's horribly selfish, to even the degree where she felt superior to Minma when she caused the split between the friends all those years ago. And with all of this, I truly believe that Anaru is the exact reason why Minma died. Her abrupt question caused Jinta to panic, say something he regrets, and leave because of the embarrassment. Minma followed behind him, but she got stopped by Yukiatsu, and because of this, she got a bit too far away from Jinta, and thus lost her place. It's likely that she tripped and fell into the river and drowned while worryingly searching for our protagonist. It's never explained in such detail, but I believe that that's the sequence of events that led to her demise, and I don't get how no one holds any malice towards her for not only destroying their friendship, but also inadvertently taking the one friend that held them together away. They were all good friends when they were kids, but seeing how they changed with Minma's death, you start noticing how much their worth as friends has dwindled over time. Their guilt-laden minds might have distanced each of them from one another, but seeing how they just couldn't be friends without Minma really showcases how much they shouldn't have been friends in the first place. But I don't really want to focus that much more on what I've already said, since it's ultimately not important. The thing that actually matters is what leads up to the conclusion of the series. It's a worrying thing to see how this anime all ends with everyone just being friends again. Like they're pretending that 5 years of being out of touch or being treated like garbage by one another didn't even happen. It's jarring to see how that fact could be overlooked simply because of Minma, especially when you take into account how everyone but Popo doubted or got angry at Jinta for reopening their roughly 6-year-old wounds. The worst thing to come from this anime is how I feel that the characters in this series would have been much better off if Jinta just ignored the ghost of Minma, or if Minma never came back to them. It causes way too much trouble and everyone was just fine living their own lives, even if they were worse for wear compared to the ending that we got. The ending of the anime feels so hollow simply because these people are just bound to let history repeat itself, but they're going to end up a whole lot worse. The only people that ultimately benefited from Minma coming back was her own family. The changes everyone went through after Minma were very negligible. It's even stated a couple of times throughout the anime that they never really changed from how they were as kids, and how poorly most of them treat each other exemplifies how much they haven't. For the entirety of the anime, most of the cast is driven by their jealousy, and it makes even less sense for their collective ending. Because of that, it just makes it feel like everything in the series was just all for naught, especially since it makes the end feel like a glass shell that could break at any point if you look away from it. You end up worrying for what happens to the characters when the story isn't showing them anymore. Every character but Minma and her family are pretty fickle. They think too much of themselves, and they'll eventually return to form of not being able to stand each other again. They're all worthless friends, and they really don't even deserve the forgiveness of Minma. Their resolution was just all falsities, a facade of what they believe would appease their spirit, and at some point, they'll start distancing themselves again and be like how they were at the start.